Kevin Durant was always an extraordinary talent, one of those that appear once in a generation. A guy capable of making the ball look like a toy in his hands, a scorer as elegant as he was lethal, someone destined to write his name in the grand history of basketball. But on the same page where his greatness is written, an uncomfortable word was scribbled, one that haunts him to this day: coward. It's not a light accusation. It was Stephen A. Smith himself, one of the sport's most influential analysts, who described his decision to sign with Golden State as the weakest move I've ever seen from a superstar in my life. And those words didn't just vanish into thin air, they became a constant echo every time we talk about Durant, because we're not talking about just any player. Durant was already one of the best on the planet. He already had Westbrook by his side. He was already one step away from the finals, and yet he chose to cross into the other locker room, to the very team that had eliminated him. That move, that transfer, completely changed the way the world perceives him. The question that has lingered ever since is not whether Kevin Durant was great, because no one doubts that, but whether he ever wanted to carry the burden of proving it on his own. Kevin Durant's story in Oklahoma City seemed written to end in glory. The team was young, explosive, with an energy that felt like the inevitable future of the NBA. Durant was the banner, Westbrook the uncontrolled engine, and together they had spent years knocking on the door of the summit. In 2012, they had already reached the finals against LeBron and the Heat, and although they lost, the feeling was clear: that generation was destined to return. The moment came in 2016. Oklahoma faced the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. This wasn't just any opponent. The Warriors were the defending champions and had just posted a historic 73-9 regular season record, the best of all time. They were the monster to beat, and against all odds, the Thunder had them on the ropes. They won Game 1 in Oakland, 108-102, lost the second, but then dominated at home, 133-105 in Game 3, and 118-94 in Game 4. Suddenly, the series was 3-1 in favor of Oklahoma City, just one win away from eliminating the best regular season team in history and returning to the NBA Finals. That's where the turning point came. In Game 5 in Oakland, Golden State survived thanks to Stephen Curry, 31 points, and a solid Klay Thompson. It was a 120-111 that kept the series alive. But the real blow came 2 nights later. Game 6 in Oklahoma went down in history as the Klay game. The Thunder had the game under control, but Thompson had a science fiction kind of night, 41 points and 11 three-pointers, a playoff record at the time. Durant was erratic, making 10 of 31 shots, and Westbrook couldn't close it either. The final score was 108-101 for the Warriors, silencing a Chesapeake Arena that already felt like it was in the finals. The final nail came in Game 7 in Oakland. Curry, with 36 points, sealed the comeback. Golden State won 96-88 and took the series. In a matter of days, the Thunder had let the opportunity of a lifetime slip away. That collapse wasn't just a sports defeat, it was a wound that never healed. Oklahoma was 48 minutes away from toppling the giant and crumbled. And although basketball history is full of stumbles before glory, Jordan was also eliminated, LeBron also lost before reigning, Durant chose not to try again. That defeat became the perfect excuse to make the most controversial decision of his career. On July 4th, 2016, while the United States celebrated its independence, Kevin Durant signed his surrender. That day, he announced through a letter in the Players Tribune that he was leaving the Oklahoma City Thunder to join none other than the Golden State Warriors, the very same team that had eliminated him just weeks earlier, the same team that came back in a historic series that he couldn't close. The news hit the NBA like a nuclear bomb. Thunder fans felt the betrayal like a stab to the heart. Durant jerseys were burned in the streets, murals were destroyed, and within hours, the man who had been the idol of an entire city became a villain. His relationship with Russell Westbrook, his partner for nearly a decade, broke instantly. There was no warning, no goodbye. Durant simply left, abandoning his teammate in the desert. The media didn't take long to label it the weakest move by a superstar, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, and that definition became tattooed onto the narrative. It didn't matter how talented he was, it didn't matter what he had already accomplished. The decision to join a direct rival was interpreted as pure cowardice. This wasn't about seeking a fresh start, it was about jumping on the bullet train that had just run him over. What hurt fans and much of the press the most was the feeling that Durant had given up the fight. He didn't lose to time, he didn't lose to injuries or to a depleted roster. He had everything to keep competing, and he walked away. The public narrative painted him as someone who chose the shortcut, trading the challenge of building his own legacy for a ride on a train that was already moving. The irony is that Durant announced it with a near spiritual tone, speaking about personal growth and new horizons. But to most people, only one message came through: that one of the best players on the planet had chosen to step out of the ring just when the fight was at its fiercest. Every time Kevin Durant's decision is discussed, the inevitable mirror is LeBron James in 2010. Both were superstars in search of a championship, both chose to leave their teams, and both triggered media earthquakes, but the comparison quickly breaks down when you look at the context. When LeBron left Cleveland, his team was empty. The Cavaliers roster was little more than him and a group of role players who were never enough to win in the decisive stages. He had dragged that roster to the 2007 finals, but the talent gap was brutal. His move to Miami was seen as controversial, yes, but also as logical. He needed real help to win. Wade was already a champion, Bosh was an all-star, and LeBron wanted to build a big three capable of competing with the dynasties of the time. Durant, on the other hand, wasn't alone. He had Russell Westbrook, one of the top 5 players in the league at the time. He had a competitive team that had just come within a step of eliminating Golden State, and he had the entire city of Oklahoma behind him. His move wasn't toward the unknown or a new challenge, it was directly to the team that had just beaten him. The ultimate rival, the enemy he had on the ropes. That's the difference that ignited the debate. When LeBron went to Miami, he was criticized for teaming up with other stars, but when Durant signed with the Warriors, what people saw was an elite player surrendering to the one who had just defeated him. Charles Barkley summed it up in a phrase that still echoes, "Durant's not the bus driver, he's a passenger," a brutal metaphor that reinforced the idea that he wasn't looking to lead, but preferred someone else to take the wheel. And there's another nuance. In Miami, LeBron was still the guy. It was his team, his project. He was the face of the franchise. Durant, by contrast, joined a team that already had an undisputed leader, Stephen Curry, the player who had changed basketball and was the face of a rising dynasty. Durant might have been the most talented piece, but he would never be the heart of the project. That's why the public narrative was relentless. LeBron was criticized, yes, but when he won in 2012 and 2013, that discussion faded into the background. He had proven he could be the absolute leader. Durant, on the other hand, carried a label that never fully disappeared, that his rings would always be questioned because they came with a team that was already at the top before he got there. The difference wasn't just about basketball, it was symbolic. LeBron went out to forge his own path, Durant chose to ride someone else's, and in the NBA, where legacy weighs as much as titles, that nuance became a sentence that still haunts him to this day. If Durant was looking for quick results, he found them immediately. His first season with Golden State was a whirlwind. The Warriors steamrolled through the regular season, and in the playoffs, they looked like a video game. With Curry, Thompson, Green, and now Durant, the team was virtually unbeatable. In the 2017 finals against LeBron's Cleveland Cavaliers, Durant made sure to erase any doubt about his impact. He averaged 35.2 points, 8.4 rebounds, and 5.4 assists, shooting 55% from the field and 47% from three. In Game 3, he hit an iconic three-pointer in LeBron's face in Cleveland that felt like a stamp of ownership. "This is my championship." He was named Finals MVP, and there was no debate. He had dominated the series from start to finish. The story repeated itself in 2018. Once again, Warriors versus Cavaliers. Once again, Durant was relentless. This time he averaged 28.8 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 7.5 assists, and once again took home the Finals MVP trophy. 2 straight championships, 2 Finals MVPs, and confirmation that on the court, he was every bit as lethal as people had always said. In numbers, in performance, in dominance, Durant had more than delivered. He had come to Golden State and not only fit in, he had become the most dangerous weapon in their arsenal. He was the silent assassin, the one who capitalized on the gravity created by Curry and Thompson to dismantle entire defenses with insulting ease. And yet even in the midst of that glory, the shadow remained. Because no one doubted his talent, no one could say he wasn't the best player in those finals, but the question lingered in the air. How much did those championships really belong to him? Had he truly proven what he seemed so desperate to show? On paper, Durant had it all. Rings, MVPs, recognition. On the court, he was the best player in the most important series of the year. But outside, in the narrative, the feeling was something else, that those titles, instead of cleaning his image, only made it more controversial. The Golden State rings should have been Kevin Durant's ultimate crowning moment. He had titles, he had Finals MVPs, he had historic performances on the biggest stage. For any other superstar, that would be the end of the discussion. But with Durant, the opposite happened. Instead of sealing his career, those championships opened a crack in his legacy. The narrative never forgave him. For many, those titles came with a giant asterisk. Golden State had already won without him. They were champions in 2015. They had already set the 73 win record in 2016. With or without Durant, the Warriors were already a juggernaut. And so the uncomfortable question arose, did Durant take them to the top, or did he just hop on a train that was already there? That doubt cut deep because although Durant was the best player on the court, he could never be the owner of the team. Golden State had a heart and an identity built around Stephen Curry. It was his culture, his style, his franchise. Durant might have been the brightest star, but Curry remained the sun around which everything revolved. That tension, subtle but constant, was felt both on and off the court. Even inside the locker room, rumors spoke of friction. The famous 2018 argument with Draymond Green when he told Durant, "You're gonna leave, we don't need you," was a clear sign that the harmony was far from perfect. Although Durant had been key in 2 championships, he never fully became an organic part of that family. He was the lethal reinforcement, yes, but always with the label of an outsider. In the public eye, the coward label evolved into something more complex, the idea that Durant never wanted to be the absolute leader, that he always looked for a shorter path, a more comfortable context where he could shine without carrying the full weight of the project. In other words, that his rings were full of glory, but empty of ownership. That's why every trophy he lifted, every MVP he received came with a whisper, yeah, but, and that but is what separates the players who define an era from those who build untouchable legends. Durant had won it all in Golden State, but in the eternal conversation about legacy, what he had earned were more questions than answers. Durant's decision didn't just devastate Oklahoma fans, it also shattered one of the most explosive and charismatic duos in modern NBA history, Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. For nearly a decade, they had shared everything: wins, losses, championship dreams. They were the heart of the Thunder, the duo that symbolized the hope of a small city that had found its identity in them. But when Durant left for Golden State, his relationship with Westbrook was abruptly broken. There was no private conversation, no heads up. Russ found out like everyone else by reading the announcement online. That silence was seen as a personal betrayal. The teammate who was supposed to be his brother in battle had abandoned him without even looking him in the eye. The tension spilled onto the court. In the first season after Durant's departure, Westbrook exploded with an MVP campaign, averaging a triple-double, as if trying to prove he didn't need him. Every matchup against Golden State became a must-watch spectacle filled with drama, death stares, physical clashes, and the famous moment when Westbrook muttered, "I'm coming," after bumping into Durant like a promise of eternal war. Games between the Thunder and Warriors became unmissable events. Oklahoma fans booed Durant with an intensity rarely seen. They greeted him with traitor signs and a chant that became an anthem in the arena: Cupcake. The nickname suggested he was soft, weak, fragile. That word, cupcake, became the symbol of the hatred his decision had ignited. In interviews, Durant tried to downplay the tension, but Westbrook never hid his resentment. For years, every time they faced each other, it felt like a personal battle, far beyond the scoreboard. It wasn't just basketball, it was pride, ego, and the pain of a broken friendship. Over time, both claimed to have moved on, but the truth is, the breakup between Durant and Westbrook left a scar on the NBA. Because it wasn't just the separation of two stars, it was the collapse of a partnership that could have defined an era and instead became one of the great unfinished stories in sports. If on the court, Durant looked unstoppable, off the court, he showed something that didn't quite fit the image of a bulletproof superstar: an extreme sensitivity to what was said about him. No other player of his caliber let himself be so consumed by the media narrative and public opinion like Kevin Durant. From the very beginning in Golden State, every interview was tinted by the same question: do his rings really count the same? Durant tried to answer calmly, but the poison still got through. Analysts like Charles Barkley called him a passenger on the bus. Shaquille O'Neal said he had taken the easy way out, and fans on social media hammered him relentlessly. Durant couldn't stay silent. On Twitter, he became a digital warrior, arguing with anonymous fans, responding to criticism, defending his decisions. But the most explosive moment came to light in 2017. It was discovered that he had been using burner accounts, fake profiles, to reply in the third person and justify his choices. In one of those accidental tweets written from his official account, he directly criticized Billy Donovan, his former coach in Oklahoma, and his ex-Thunder teammates. It was a public embarrassment. One of the best players on the planet caught defending himself behind anonymous accounts. That episode humanized him, but also exposed him. It showed that the criticism got to him deeply, that the coward narrative wasn't just outside noise, it was eating him up inside. Far from being an invincible Superman, Durant appeared as a cosmic-level talent with skin too thin for the media storm that surrounded him. Over time, he tried to own that vulnerability. In interviews, he admitted he was too sensitive, that he spent too much time on Twitter, that he couldn't ignore what people were saying, but the public perception was already set in stone. Not only had he joined the enemy, not only had he won with a ready-made team, but he also couldn't handle being reminded of it. The contrast was brutal. On the court, Durant was pure ice. Off the court, he seemed to live with his heart exposed. And that contradiction only fueled the narrative further, that despite his greatness, there was something in his character that never quite fit what we expect from a true superstar. After 3 seasons in Golden State with 2 rings and a torn Achilles in the 2019 finals, Kevin Durant looked for a fresh start, and he found it in the most unexpected place: Brooklyn. On July 7th, 2019, Durant announced he was signing with the Nets alongside his friend Kyrie Irving. A few months later, James Harden would also join the project. It was the perfect plan, a new big three that promised to dominate the NBA in the coming decade. The narrative was set. Durant wanted to prove he could win away from Golden State, that he could lead a team from scratch scratch. The Nets went from being a secondary franchise in New York to the center of the basketball universe. With KD, Kyrie, and Harden, it seemed like only a matter of time before the Larry O'Brien Trophy made its way to Brooklyn. The expectations were enormous. Ahead of the 2020-21 season, many analysts picked them as the clear favorites. Durant was returning from a devastating injury, but in his first games back, he looked like the same silent assassin as always, scoring with the same ease, having lost none of his talent. Alongside Kyrie's creativity and Harden's power, it felt like we were witnessing the most talented team on paper since the LeBron Wade Bosch Miami Heat. The peak came in the 2021 playoffs in the series against Milwaukee. Harden was injured, Irving went down in Game 4, and Durant was left almost entirely alone. That's when he delivered one of the most memorable performances of his career. In Game 5, he recorded 49 points, 17 rebounds, and 10 assists, playing all 48 minutes. It was a basketball masterpiece that made people believe Durant was ready to write a new narrative, the hero who carried his team on his own. Fate was cruel once again. In Game 7, with the series tied, Durant hit a shot that looked like the game winner until the replay showed his foot was just on the three-point line. It was a 2, not a 3. The game went into overtime, and Milwaukee, who would go on to win the championship, eliminated the Nets. That image of Durant staring in disbelief at his oversized sneakers became the symbol of what could have been, but wasn't. Durant's shot in Game 7 against Milwaukee became a cruel symbol. He was inches away from eliminating the eventual champions, but that one oversized foot condemned him. In a way, that play foreshadowed what the entire Nets project would become, a gigantic dream that never fully materialized. Injuries were the first blow. Durant missed the entire 2019-20 season due to the Achilles tendon tear. Harden arrived out of shape, struggling with muscle issues. Kyrie Irving, meanwhile, was an enigma, brilliant on the court but unpredictable off it. Between personal breaks, injuries, and controversies, he became an impossible factor to manage. The numbers say it all. The Durant-Kyrie-Harden trio, which on paper seemed one of the most fearsome in history, played only 16 regular season games together. There was never continuity, never enough real time to build an identity. To the sporting fragility, off-court chaos was added. Kyrie was absent for entire weeks without clear explanations, and then the vaccine saga exploded. New York laws made him ineligible to play at home, splitting the team in two. Harden, tired of the disorder, requested a trade to Philadelphia in February 2022. Durant, frustrated, went further. In the summer of that same year, reports said he demanded the dismissal of coach Steve Nash and general manager Sean Marks. Brooklyn went from NBA mecca to a powder keg. The collapse was definitive in the 2022 playoffs. The Nets were swept 4-0 by the Boston Celtics, a humiliation unprecedented for Durant, who for the first time in his career left a series without winning a single game. Boston's defense trapped him like never before, reducing him to an unrecognizable role. That image of KD, one of the most unstoppable scorers in history, being suffocated with no answers, was devastating. Brooklyn was supposed to be Durant's redemption, to prove he could lead his own project without relying on Golden State. Instead, it ended up as one of the biggest disappointments of the modern era, a team that lived more in the headlines than on the court, leaving Durant with more questions than answers about his place in history. After the collapse in Brooklyn, Durant needed another way out. His story seemed to repeat itself, a superstar trying to rewrite the narrative, this time in the desert. In February 2023, he was traded to the Phoenix Suns, a move that once again shook the NBA. The bet was clear. Pair Durant with Devin Booker, one of the brightest young stars in the league, and Bradley Beal, forming a trio that on paper was supposed to return Phoenix to the finals. Durant's arrival was received as a kind of salvation. The Suns had already come close to glory in 2021 with Chris Paul and Booker, but fell short. Now they had one of the greatest scorers of all time. In theory, the missing piece to finally make the leap. In his first games, Durant showed flashes of what could be surgical efficiency, effortless scoring, that feeling that with him on the floor, everything got easier. But reality quickly revealed its cracks. Durant arrived with a body worn down by years of injuries, his availability was inconsistent, and every absence weighed heavily on a team that relied too much on him and Booker. The first hard blow came in the 2023 playoffs. The Suns were eliminated in the second round by the Denver Nuggets, the team that would go on to win the title. Booker and Durant carried the entire offensive load, but the rest of the roster couldn't keep up. The image felt familiar to Brooklyn, a few magical nights from Durant, but not enough to sustain a deep title run. The following season, with Bradley Beal added to the project, expectations swelled once again. 3 superstars, a new coach, and the promise that this time they were ready. But once more, the illusion faded. Injuries, lack of chemistry, and a thin bench turned the Suns into a paper giant. In the 2024 playoffs, Phoenix once again fell short, eliminated without ever truly looking like a contender. The hardest part wasn't the defeat itself, but the overwhelming sense of deja vu. Durant once again betting on a super team, once again surrounded by stars, once again falling short. Instead Instead of clearing the Golden State narrative, he seemed to be repeating the same pattern, searching for shortcuts to the top that in practice never took him all the way. For Phoenix, Durant's arrival was a dream. For the NBA, another chapter in his saga, but for KD's legacy, what remained was yet another disappointment, a mirage that shone at first but vanished the moment real pressure knocked on the door. When it seemed Durant could no longer surprise with his moves, in 2025 he shook up the market again. This time, the destination chosen was Houston. The Rockets, a young team filled with emerging talent and hungry to grow, welcomed a veteran with more than 3 decades in the league and a backpack filled with glory and controversy. The signing quickly sparked debate. For some, Houston was KD's chance to shape a different legacy, to become a mentor, the voice of experience guiding a promising generation toward relevance. A role that could redeem some of the criticism, no longer as the superstar taking shortcuts, but as a veteran leaving a mark on others. For others, however, the decision sounded like the same old story. Another attempt to insert himself into a project that didn't originate with him. Another leap driven more by anxiety than conviction. Because if anything was clear from his stints in Brooklyn and Phoenix, it was that Durant was still chasing a championship that would validate him outside the shadow of Golden State, and Houston, with all its potential, still seemed too immature to provide that in the short term. The question multiplies: can a nearly 37-year-old Durant carry a team like that? Is it realistic to think Houston has the pieces to compete in the West, where the Nuggets, Mavericks, Warriors, and Lakers coexist? Or is this just one last stop that inevitably ends in frustration? On the court, Durant still retains his ability to score from any angle, his shot impossible to block, and his surgical efficiency. But time doesn't forgive. Injuries, absences, and lack of continuity take their toll. What was once certainty is now an unknown. Houston welcomes him as a star, but also as an enigma. Will this Durant inspire the young players and transform the franchise into a contender? Time will tell if Houston is Kevin Durant's final train or just another stop on his endless journey. The only thing certain is that even at this stage, KD's story continues to raise more questions than answers. Kevin Durant is, without question, one of the most extraordinary talents that NBA has ever had. A scorer as elegant as he is unstoppable, a player capable of shaping entire games with just a few possessions, but his career was never told only in points or rings. It was always accompanied by a murmur, a doubt that followed him to every city, every franchise, every attempt at redemption. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. This was Hoop Secrets, and I'll see you next time.